Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hello again. This is Talk Cosmos. And today is June 15, 2019, and we repeat next Thursday at 6 a.m. on the 20th, of June. And tonight's topic is our third mini session on the Kabbalah letters that relate directly to the astrological archetype. And tonight's letter is Zayin. Z-A-Y-I-N. It's the seventh number. It's a value, has the number 7, but we'll get involved really about what it represents and its symbolic significance later. Just to update people, there have been 3 talks, one on Aries, which was Hey, yes, H-E-I, and then Vav for Taurus, V-A-V. And they're very significant in a very building block method to give a deep insight into the energetic meaningfulness and intention of these energies that we relate to in astrology. Both Kabbalah and astrology are ancient. And looking as I read and study these efforts, it's really a realization that it's perhaps linked also with Sanskrit. I am not the eminent scholar. I'm only a student, but I do appreciate tremendously the contribution that Kabbalah makes with all of these deeply spiritually connected energies. So tonight's guest again is Dana Bernbach from Newcastle, New York. She's a certified evolutionary astrologer and does chart consultations. And she devotes her time towards understanding these Kabbalah letters, and also is a pediatric nurse outpatient practitioner there. So I welcome once again Dana. Thank you. I'm really glad that we've made this connection to work together to better understand these deep insights.
Yes, thank you, Sue. Great to be with you again. It's really a pleasure.
It is. And I might mention to our audience that our intention is to pause through the luminaries, through Cancer and Leo, and we'll return for Virgo, which again will be with Mercury, the other side of Mercury, because Gemini is Mercury. There is so much I could begin with. Zayin, when you first read in, it says motion, which I did find some good information and insights on, but before that, it really talks about other factors, such as to remember, and the sword, the shape of it. And it's really a spiritual weapon, one could say, because the sword relates to the tongue, and it's the battle that is worth fighting for to really gain spiritual comprehension. But all of this might be broader than what we want to begin with.
Yes, well, it's so interesting, as you mentioned in the beginning, that Zayin is connected to the number 7. It actually represents 7. It looks like a 7. So we know just from this connection alone that we're already on a different plane. We're connecting we know the 7 relates to the emotional realm, but it's already bringing the spiritual into the physical. So the 7 is very, very important in Kabbalah and the ancient wisdom because of this, because we know of the 7 planets, the 7 creative planets, the 7 creative fruits, the 7 days of creation, which are actually, people kind of, people who sort of ruefully laugh at that story as if it's a nice little story about in 7 days. We know from the deeper wisdom that each day is likely 1,000 years.
Yes.
And these days refer to previous creations. So when we talk about Zayin, we talk about the 7th millennium,
Yes.
which we are at the threshold of. So it's a very potent time, and it's a very potent number.
I was quite impressed also to make that connection in my own brain. I thought, my goodness, we talk in other realms about being at the 12th hour, but here it would be the 18th hour of the 24, meaning there's still hundreds of years, but it does give that real significance. Going to the source too of Zayin, it is the feminine. It was that energy. Speaking of the 7th day, and going to now it is the biblical references, but interpreting those in depth, because it goes back to the concept that the great all, as I refer to it, or the speechless, the wordless, the unnamed one, is an androgynous of all energy, male and female, masculine rather, or feminine, not to differentiate between just personages, but energy. And that it wasn't until it was separated, in other words, removing this feminine that is part of all humans, in order to create, for the process of creation, and it goes back, and I'll throw all this out, and then you can help dissect it. That it allows for creation, because all of the six days prior, or those 6,000 years, or the other cycles will constitute the physicality of development. It isn't until the connection, the motion, the interaction of the two of these polarities that can interact, that it's like thought. Once words are, it was like the letters are, here I'm sort of jumping around a little bit, but the letters are the spiritual vessels, or the spiritual factors, and when they're put together it makes a word that becomes manifested. In the same sense, the Zayin, coming from the Vav, or out of the whole, but out of the whole energy of the androgynous, not that Vav is androgynous, because Vav is more masculine, which was the Taurus, but going back to the original, that it's like thought then becomes creation by reflection, by remembering, by praising. Like they were saying, it's part of the Yah, praise, which related to the God, or to the unknown or unnamed factor. So by 7th, it really gives significance to what rest is, that it isn't just not doing anything, it's a embodiment. Would that be the right word, I think?
I think so, in many ways. Well, yes, it really is in pictorial form, or as we spoke from the beginning about the ideogram, it really is the Vav. It's like which forms the handle, and then a Yud on top at a slant, which forms the blade of the sword. So when we know from Yud, well, although we haven't really delved into it, maybe when we get to Virgo we will, but that is up in Chokhmah, that's Yah is the name of God up in the supernal realm, in Chokhmah, in the unmanifest, before even the mother, before Binah. So there are so many deep mysteries about this letter Zayin. When you look at the correspondences alone, because within, when you look at Zayin and how it's spelled in Hebrew, it's actually spelled with a Zayin first, of course, its first letter, and then a Yud, and then a Nun. So we have embedded in this the Father and the Mother and the Son all together. So we're talking about the unmanifest aspect of Creator, and then the womb, we talked about in Hey, Binah, and then the sun, which is literally the sun in Tiferet. There's so many connections between Gemini and Mercury, and which is its own Sephirah Hod, but with the sun, because the letter Zayin is the path that links Binah, the mother, with Tiferet, which in the world of Asiya, our physical world, is the planet, the sun. So there's really incredible mysteries about how potent this letter is.
You know, thinking about Gemini, because just briefly with the twins, Castor,
Yes.
one being mortal and one being immortal, Castor the mortal, and Pollux the immortal, and through death of Castor, this intense yearning to be connected, and it was granted that, and even the constellation is seen half the year and half not the year. So whether they both, symbolically with that representation, but there's that connection between the death and the birth, and in the death of the spirit, going into the spirit world is my point of this, and thinking of this connection, this traveling, this motion that connects the all, whether it's in the underworld or not. But once we're not in the physical, then it's the spirit world, heavens and all of it. So it is powerful to consider that in this totality that constitutes the wholeness, which would involve, if you separated it, the masculine, the feminine, and the birth of the child, however that's considered, whether the son or the daughter, so
with Malchut, yes. This is the beginning of, this is the top in our realm. Yes, Tiferet is the top of the triangle, the double triangle of our realm. So if if people are looking at the glyph of the tree of life, Tiferet, which can be conceived of or thought of as corresponding with our sun.
In the tree of life, yes, just to mention to people, and also the 6 directions, yes. So when you say the top, there's
not the top of the lower triangles is the sun, and then on each side is Hod and Netzach, which are Mercury and Venus. But when we're looking at the middle pillar, that's what I was just wanting to dive back to.
Yes.
Tiferet tops in our realm the top of the middle pillar, which then goes down to Yesod, associated with Vav, and then down to Malchut, the daughter, which we talked about when we talked about Taurus last month. But it is that realm, the middle pillar,
yes,
that unites the masculine and the feminine.
And sexuality really is often described as one's reading and learning, deeply about this letter. And because of the fact that if you have from the whole, you have the feminine removed, in order to for that function of creativity, which we have, and remembering too that it's within us. And again, that is a word, because it seems like there was a prophet there that meant remembering, and the remembering this
Yes,
energy,
Zechariah.
yes, within ourselves. That is really, and the stillness of the moment. That was a big factor of this, that it's not just to rest, but to contemplate on what has been made and to give to thanks. It's this reverence of creation itself that is in many, maybe a new age and maybe with the Indian culture and other factors of many meditations, because it also relates to the chakras, the seven lights. So
yes, well, we have the universe inside our body, so we have for sure the chakras, the sephirot. There's correspondences, because that's the Kabbalists would always reiterate that the entire universe is within us as well. We carry that, and it's through the seed that we're able to embody it. And the Hebrew word for seed that's derived from sperm is zera, and that begins with also the letter Zayin. So there's really a very potent force in this letter, which is connected with Gemini because of the kind of intelligence that it's associated with. It's known as a disposing intelligence, which really is very closely related to discernment. You know, so it was so interesting when you opened a few minutes ago and you said that I'm going to I'm going to put out a lot out there, and then we'll kind of, how did you say, categorize it? This is exactly the kind of
dissect it or something.
Dissect it. Yes. Well, it's literally the sword, the path of the sword, disposing intelligence, which is so related, of course, as we know, with the Gemini aspect of Mercury, is to literally place apart, to arrange. I'm tapping into the work of Paul Foster Case, to apportion understanding in its proper place, to divide, analyze, classify. This is to adjust. This is the kind of, so this is really why, when you think about why the sword, this is the cutting down and breaking into parts and putting it into different places.
Manageable, yes.
Manageable. And what's so interesting is that it also means, this is the double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Is that at the same time, it also means, it's known as to nourish. So how is it that the sword can bring nourishment?
Well,
how interesting. It really is two sides of a sword.
Well, it is, except the further, and I'm so glad you brought this up, and it's so fascinating just to listen to all your perspectives and how you present it too. When I kept going back to the fact of like a spiritual sword, that we need, it's the sword that like there's light. It connects, it's that reflected light, the Zayin from the Vav, which is the direct light that comes down from the All. And in that case, it nourishes us, because if we reflect within that, we contemplate and we become that oneness that is of the All, that in this world of polarities we're unable to do, but yet through polarity we can create. So it's a mixed bag that way. And it has been terribly misunderstood, and it was recognized that way too, as I would read, that it isn't just to lay on the and be nullified, but yet to be sanctified, to be in present moment, the true form of meditation,
Yes, the true now,
Yes.
true now. That is really bringing back to the beginning, the talk about the connection with the number 7 and the Sabbath, Shabbat, which is literally means 7. And also it's from which the word to sit is derived, because we sit and rest on the 7th. So that really is to make something holy, to, like, as you just said, so to sanctify, to bring into the whole, to be in the now is to be present in that rest.
Yes, because so many times when one reads about manifestation, it is that the steps involve feeling it and in visualizing it, but it is a consciousness that and in many ways too, to remember thanks. It came again and again that because of our direction, we can get it's natural perhaps to think or to perceive that who is responsible, what is the real energy involved with what we manifest. And yes, we allow ourselves to view things, but yet there is this energetic spirituality that we're all part of, that more and more we can align ourselves and realize that in that realm is where we derive our manifestation.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I wanted to actually bring up something here that this is again also from the work of Paul Foster Case, who I'm sure many of the listeners are already well aware that he did such deep work with the Tarot and the correspondences of the Hebrew letters and that form of Kabbalistic path. But when we talk about the path of Zayin and it's connected with the tarot card, the Lovers, we talk about a harmonizing of different levels of consciousness. So it's kind of like what you were saying about how through the polarity to get into unity, he speaks about through our intellectual consciousness alone. Of course, we're not going to do that. So how do we get to super consciousness? By bringing our self-consciousness, which is very much in the intellectual side of things, with subconsciousness, which he says is the woman in the Lover's card. The subconscious is the feminine. And through working through the subconscious mind, then we get to super consciousness, which is when we tap into the realm of Tiferet, the sun. And then through Tiferet, then we can get up to the supernals, to the divine plane.
That's very well. Yes, I in fact I've jotted down his name, and that's good. In fact, we happen to be this week. There is a T-square, and it's with the sun in 19 degrees in Gemini, opposing Jupiter in 19 degrees Sag, squared by Neptune 18 or 19 in Pisces. And when you speak of that, I think, my goodness, this is really embracing that, because it's the sun, it's the will that we're expressing things through, and it is the higher consciousness of Jupiter in its own sign. They're all in their own sign. Trying to express this all of spirituality, the oneness. So you've spoken on so many factors, and we both have, trying to tie this together, the divinity of Zayin, and really the fact that going back to that it's all within. Yes, we have the physicality of there's a feminine and the masculine person, but yet within this energy. I'm just thinking that I'm trying to link back to what you were talking about there, Dana.
Well, it really is. It really is. This, we're getting when we speak about the esoteric wisdom, there's so much emphasis on what's known as the law of correspondence. So and this is just, of course, all of our talks are related to that: numbers, numerical value of letters, and paths on the tree of life. It's so It's linking things that are seemingly unrelated to the naked eye, to the physical eye, and showing how actually they're not so unrelated. So with this Zayin, which is such a when you think of the sword, it's such a militaristic connotation. How interesting that it actually does bridge. It bridges the 6 into the 7. It really pulls in the spiritual plane at this point. So it is kind of funny thinking of so much about how when we're talking about Gemini, we think a lot about, all the stuff that we love about Gemini, the social, the rational mind, taking in, just inhaling, to use that word because Gemini and its association with the lungs, but inhaling all this data. But it really is sorting it all out. And ultimately, it is to be used for a divine purpose. Bringing the back to the 7.
That beautifully coordinates it. We'll take a brief announcement. This is Talk Cosmos. June, I have to remember what day it is. It's the 15th, repeated on the 20th. And I'm speaking with Dana Bernbach about Kabbalah and the letter Zayin. We'll be right back. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the period of Gemini. By leaving a cycle based on physical form, integrated through spirit, the energy of Gemini connects spirit with matter, focused on communicating and defining the external. Gemini is a mutable air sign signifying flexibility. Gemini dually focuses upon teaching and learning in order to synthesize the world one lives within.
Hello, this is Wendy Wyrot, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk, 1150 AM, where we unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconscious.
Alternative Talk, 1150 on AM, 98.9 HD3 on HD, 1150kknw.com on the web.
Hi, Dana. You were just mentioning before the break about the law of correspondence and interlocking these apparently on the physical, the separation of matter that actually has a commonality. And you were mentioning about, which I think is a wonderful factor, the Gemini inhaling this to find the spirituality of it. I'm not sure if I'm just relating exactly, but just to help you go on with your great thoughts here.
Yes. Well, I would be amiss to not bring up during this talk how the timing is so aligned, as you mentioned, also the T-square that we're experiencing as we record this, but also we're recording this at the very end of the holiday of Shavuot, which the name of the holiday comes from the root 7. It comes from Shavua, is a week, and it means weeks. It's the plural. Of course, within the root of the word Shavua, week, is the number 7 because we have 7 days in the week. So these are the end of the weeks between the Passover holiday and this particular holiday that just ended this morning.
Oh.
And it's the sign, it is on purpose. It's occurring now. Of course, the Kabbalists were very aware of the timing and the astrology and the calendar dates. It occurs in the month of Sivan, around between the 6 and the 7. And the story of the book of Ruth, which is read during this holiday, and it's actually the harvest of the wheat, which is so interesting because when we segue, when we meet up likely at the end of the summer and we talk about Virgo, Mercury's other sign, how fitting that this is the harvest of the wheat. And think of the sword cutting down the sheaves.
Yes, it's more nourishment too. Again and
Yes.
again, these themes relate. And I think that's a really intriguing importance, the significance that I'm personally experiencing. And I hope I feel like even, I mean, it is a very complex, I mean, it's simple, but it's a complex, it's life, trying to explain all of this or decipher it. But I think for those people that are interested, and I'm so grateful there are, that they can begin to follow with us the realm of this continuity. And you brought that up. That's beautiful. Here it is, Mercury. On the one hand, it's the tongue, which is also the sword. It represented as the tongue. And then bringing the sheath of wheat, which is that whole legacy of nourishment of a food. Again, it's that further manifestation, isn't it, of what nourishes us, or what potentially can. Those are important words to remember too, potential.
Yes, exactly. And also the word that means nourishment, mazon or hazana, encapsulates within it the letter Zayin, and it means nourishment. It's through this path, it's through Zayin and the sword that we receive our nourishment. And that also we receive, because it also means not only nourishment, but it means to balance or to harmonize, which, getting back to the type of intelligence, the disposing intelligence that ultimately needs to harmonize the different levels of consciousness in order.
Yes, and
to unify.
It is. And to remind people, this is Zayn, is, at least in our modern language, is how this is being. And from what I was reading, it's the source of all movement, which really finally gets right back to that Gemini quality, because it's as above as below, and it's the because of the creativity element, it's bringing that dynamic of the light, the pure light, and reflecting it back up. It's further to be realized, but movement. I love that.
Yes, it's of course, we know with Gemini, it's the movement, the physical, and it's also the way, the walking. We walk physically, but it's also how we walk the path.
Oh.
So that's and if
that's powerful.
Yeah, how we bring our physical life together with the spiritual is we can walk, and we can walk the path. And there's a correspondence also in the Hebrew, because holech, which is walk or walking, literally I'm walking, and halacha, which is literally the body of, it's almost like the law, the way of practicing. It's the same root. It literally comes from walking, which was known as the sense, one of the sense, the verb really for Gemini.
Well,
articulation.
Yes, because Gemini really, as far as astrology, also relates to our environment, what is within our space here, whether it's our sisters and brothers, and whether it's our neighbors, and all of that. So it's where as you encounter these new things to categorize, to find out about. It's very strong. And it also, when I'm looking at this, is that power, when you say the path, that makes me think it's the power within a person, that causes them to speak, initiate, live. So in that sense, it's like you say, that path is walking our talk, right? And that's one of the phrases that people.
Yes. So true. So true. And it's that, yes, it's that power that comes from, of course, we see it, the sun on the physical level that provides sustenance and nourishment. And of course, we know it's fueled from behind that through the different worlds.
Yes, and
When
light.
we're
And
using this language.
going back to that, it's light being reflected that really gets in. And when you think about it, that's what the soul, we interpret. It's often said our sun sign, our moon is what we, reflect from our sun, which changes. So that's a little different from it. But, this back to the sword, I was reading it's a struggle. It's a struggle between opposites. I read it's a struggle for existence, for sustenance. And so that's really, I guess that relates also to how we're going to live our path, our walk, how we rest in our moment to create. Maybe what.
Yeah, no, it's a struggle to, I think, harmonize those and bring together those varying modes of consciousness.
Well put. It is. It is.
Yes.
I was just thinking of the chakras, that's all, but I think you have more food for
bring
thought.
that in.
Well, the chakras, again and again, it said that because it's related to the pineal gland, that Zayin sits on that pineal, pineal gland, the throne, which was fascinating. It was like, that's the throne that's so spoken of so many times. And that the vision that when the consciousness is raised from the physicality, that comes up through the lower chakras, that's where we see these 7 lamps that there's talked about in the menorah in the Hebrew. I'm not of that. I'm a student here. I'm not speaking from any personal faith orientation per se, but when you look at the menorah, which is a candelabra, it represents those 7 chakras that is within us. It's never spoken of very often except in New Age language, but this is ancient. This is where it's all very spiritually connecting to our real essence.
Yes. And of course, with the terminology that was used was because the ancients also used these terms. Of course, there's the beauty, the poetry of it, but the numerical value of the words and the correspondences were so rich, because thrones are alim in Hebrew, which also refers to cosmic powers connected with Binah, have the same numerical value as Elohim, which is connected with Binah, the mother.
And we should remind, briefly, I'll just say, Binah is understanding, and I didn't jot down the other one, because that's understanding from wisdom, from the all of it. And of course, understanding breaks it down, but like the mother, it gives birth, there's all this replication of conceptual thinking, as the building blocks. And you were talking about words and the strength.
And the correspondences.
Yeah, the correspondences.
Yes. And really how it's really, when you think about Zayin and the path, it's really the sun that sits on the throne. So if we're looking at the path from all the way up in Binah and the line connecting it to Tiferet, that is the path of the sword, of the letter Zayin. So how fascinating and incredible that the thrones are Elim, the cosmic powers of Binah, are providing the throne for the sun, literally the sun, to sit.
Yes, so that we can manifest it, just like today's chart. And I might mention to our audience that because of your distance and your work schedule, we're actually pre-recording this on Monday when this most amazing T-square is happening. But it will be, it is actually being aired on the 15th on Saturday, and then again on a repeat program on Thursday, which it is every week at 6 a.m. So it is a sunrise, sunset business, which I think is fascinating. But the fact is that today, the sun in Gemini, as we speak, of course, this is the archetype of Gemini that we're speaking of, and it's being in a T-square, looking across of awareness of Jupiter in its own sign of Sag, which is the higher realms of the heavens, of the greater belief structures, and in Neptune. So it is that sun that we're trying to, which you're saying, sitting on the throne, we're trying to integrate, to sift through our own ego-centric understanding.
Yes. Well, it really is, because Jupiter connected with the Sephira Chesed, called El on one of the worlds, one of the names of God is El, is right below Chokhmah, on the masculine path. And then Neptune, there are many references, in different correspondences with Binah. Some say Saturn, but as I know that you read in Gnostic astrology, Neptune connected with the pineal gland. Also, there is a correspondence with Binah as the great sea. Also Shabtai and Saturn traditionally, but also Neptune. So we have the left path, the feminine. We have the right path, the masculine, and then the sun in the center receiving. And here we are talking about the letter Zayin.
I am so glad for all of this, and it really steps away from the ultimate judgment rather than just noticing, recognizing, and unifying, which really is a lot with Neptune versus the Saturnian, which has its purpose of making a definition and a structure and a guideline and whatnot, and we need, in part of the world, everything is part of the world and necessary in its own relationship and dosage, as our teacher Maurice Fernandez would say. But the fact that we're relating this to Neptunian thoughts, which really, like the sea, is this great, huge, encompassing, without boundaries, uncontrolled, well, we can't control it, the unconscious and the nature that's beyond our control. It really puts it into perspective of these are just factors of existence. That yes, okay, if we're going to divide things, one's going to be on one side, one's going to be on the other side, and they interrelate, just like the Mercury's caduceus, which is the branch tree of life with the two serpents, one of the feminine and one of the masculine, which also goes back to Sanskrit, which is, again, which was fascinating to me. So where the real origin is, but they relate that the left, which we're calling Zayin, Zayin, which was taken out of man, which was just given that name as before man was the man that we consider man, it was androgynous. So that's like, whoa, somewhere our wording and our thinking is a little mixed up. In fact, in something I read too, they didn't have a word for woman. So
yes, I saw that also. So many mysteries about the beginning of creation, and because we're on the threshold of the end of the 6th millennium. This all corresponding with the age of Aquarius, about to embark on. The Kabbalah say the the 7th millennium will be back to paradise and bliss and perfection.
Well, there are, yes, the pendulum swings, but there's a spiral too, connecting the fact that, remembering, often in astrology, and people remind us that the circle goes around, but it keeps elevating, which is so Aquarian. And Aquarius and Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, which keeps reaching in this sphere-like manner, because if nothing else, Earth is hurtling through space going northward. So our cycle is going like the spiral. Yeah, so looking at this feminine, masculine energy without judgment, back to just
exposing intelligence.
Yeah, right.
Methodically arrange, apportion, classify, but there is an impartiality about that, and we know that from Gemini. That's
androgynous.
Also the impartiality, being able to take in so many facts. If you're judging and holding off, you're not going to be able to take in all that information. So it really is taking in and then apportioning and classifying. That's how I see it.
Well, that's appropriate. That's appropriate. That is a factor involved. When we look at, though, from this energy, from Zayin energy being the polarities being distinguished, the relationship is that there's a taking that, going to light, taking that light factor and returning it and going back up. They say that the force of it returning back up to the very source, which there are Hebrew words for it, which would be the keter, I think, in the tree of life.
Yes.
Yes, the very top, which is the one of everything, which is male and female, the masculine and feminine, because it hasn't been divided, is so strong. And it reminds one that is that soul factor, that comprehension of consciousness that raises, and we're kind of rethreading some of our thoughts that we've thrown out there today, because to interlace them, once things are divided, it's really like a many colors and many threads.
To bring it back together.
Yeah.
But in a new way.
Yeah.
In a
for comprehension.
In a unifying way. Yes.
Yes, and it is that light, it's that so what I'm getting at is, what was it that I was thinking of? Of categorizing. Yeah, there's might be some impartiality in a sense, but there's also this life factor of creation, of just creation itself, that and maybe for nothing else, remembering this idea of eternity, that energy never gets dissolved, or
the eight.
Yes. And that here again we see that, well, if that's a fact, if in Aries life started, there's that spark of the force of just divinity, and then it comes into a vessel of consolidation for its the light, as we're saying, penetrating down, the connecting, going back up to between the source and manifestation. That here is like, again, the life never ends, because it has this continuality of creativity, which has to do with being reborn, when you think about it in that kind of concept.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of what you're saying, this notion that when we talk about creation as being separate from the creator, and what we began, talk about a spiral, a circle, but in our first talks about the notion of the creator withholding himself, herself, the withdrawal, the concealment in order. But in the end, so we know about that. The containment, and yet in our world of polarity, we see it as so separate. But just to know that it's not, which is really the faithful intelligence. We're getting into a different pathway, but it's all one.
That's perfect.
Creator and creation are all together.
Perfect, because that shows where the veil, our seemingly experience, which we can validate. We can touch a table, we can touch our skin. We see trees, we know that things are distinct, but yet there is an underlying unified thread, which is what you're just saying. And that really, which is exemplified through this motion of going between the spiritual and the physicality, just like Castor and Pollux, or
Yes.
in the Caduceus.
Yes, and the material world is spiritual. It is spiritual, and
Yes.
that's what we're here for.
In fact, I think last week we were talking about mythologies, the twin mythologies, with Wendy Wyrot, who's here in Bellevue in Seattle. And I was reading a book on the spirituality here of Native Americans. And it isn't just isolated to the Native Americans. It's just one very strong voice, because I think all indigenous peoples, it's amazing that we even have to categorize indigenous versus other peoples of the world, but yet, factors of further multiplicity, which is another very Gemini thing,
Yes.
right from the birth of the twins, it shows that. But that everything is alive. It's really the spirit of, recognizing what you're saying, that inanimate, which
Yes.
I've often thought too, and remembering that there's this life source. It may not be alive in the sense that we live and consider, just like another person isn't necessarily like us. And that's where prejudices and unfortunate protections and fears all get started, because maybe the memory of hurt or whatever lasts too long. But a rock, it's just energy coagulated into that
vessel.
Yeah, that solidified form.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
yes, going back to everything is
Everything.
and
Going
so,
back to the atom.
So it is a struggle, and when we think about the fact that here we are in this last millennium, or some phase of some distinction, and long phase, probably it's like time. Really, if all's one, what's time? And then again, how do we measure it and how do we know it? Except to realize that there are phases and there are developments, and that there is a consciousness, a raising of it, and there's also a struggle of if there's going to be oneness, that means totality, right? Everybody on board, which, as we know in this world of current perception, has a lot to work on in that effort. So we don't know how that's all going to develop, but yet for those that, like any growth process, is the direction. It is the direction. It is this direction of remembering. It must have a lot to do with remembering, going within, of seeing those lights that we have within, of working in our own creative, of naming our own manifestation.
Yes, unifying those consciousness levels and bringing something in of the heart.
Yes, of the heart. Yes.
Bringing it back to that.
Remembering feminine, masculine is within. It seems to be a theme that we've talked about, and it keeps, because it keeps popping up, and it's
everywhere.
It's macro and micro, just like the universe we know, with whether it's atoms with a lot of space, our solar system with a lot of space. And we're going into our last minute, but we're getting there, Dana. This will be so much fun. Oh, and to remind people that next week we are beginning Cancer. We'll have cosmic collaborations with 4 or 5 different guests to kick that off. And you're listening to Dana Bernbach and Sue Rose Minahan on Zayin, the 7th letter of Kabbalah, of that nature. And we're looking at Gemini. It's been a fascinating talk, and we're going to continue with Virgo. What is the letter? Do you happen to know the letter for Virgo?
I believe Yud.
Oh, boy. Oh, my
I
goodness.
believe it's Yud. It's, we'll really take it in a deep way.
Well, we will.
We have plenty of time now to go within.
Yes, we'll take a sunshine luminary break with Cancer and Leo. The sun. Well,
Charge ahead, yes.
okay. Well, blessings to you, to everybody. Thank you for this fantastic
Blessings.
time. All right.
A pleasure, really a pleasure. All the best. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Talk to you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.